Hey everybody, this is Ryan McClanahan with HistoryThroughCards.com. I hope you're all doing very well today. There seems to be some misconceptions about the 1957 NFL Championship, and I came across an article on this that kind of cleared up everything for me anyway. One of the things I always thought that Bobby Layne uh, was he was on this team. He was a 1953 Bowman, and I actually like this card. I collect a lot of Bobby Layne cards, but I've heard that other people don't. Anyway, a little bit of an inside joke there. Anyway, so I was always under the impression that Bobby Layne was thrown off the 1957 squad and that he cursed the team, in fact. And so there's a curse of Bobby Layne because the Detroit Lions have not won a championship since, or a Super Bowl since 1957. But I thought that he actually completed the 1957 season, and then afterwards, I also thought too that their coach, uh, Buddy Parker, was also thrown off the 57 squad because he actually said that, like, well, you guys don't have a way of winning the championship, and so like that's it. Don't even try. Buddy Parker is actually up for Hall of Fame consideration shortly, and I actually hope he gets in. And I've heard a lot of really interesting things about Buddy Parker and his guy here, Bobby Layne, too. This actually is more to do with this gentleman right here. This is Tobin Rote, and this is a 1951 Bowman. It's actually a really fantastic card. I really love this set. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Bowman, and this is when he's on the Packers. The design here of the logo is really fantastic, along with the helmet too. I'm not entirely sure if these helmets really protected the players or not. It kind of seems to me that uh, they weren't very functional, but then again, the steel helmets actually provide a different. I'm not going to say it's an added protection. What I'm going to say is that uh, players probably thought that the steel helmets um, were like a false sense of security, if you will, that it made it easier for them to ram their heads into opposing players, and that created a lot of like CTE and maybe dementia along the way as well. But the thing is, we don't really see a whole lot of cases of dementia in older ball players uh, who played in the 1920s or even early to mid 30s. It's usually guys after, say, like World War II, that we see a lot of cases of CTE and dementia. That's a different story altogether. But the design of this particular card, the helmet, the colors, which are fantastic, and the logo really kind of make this card shine. And it's a really fantastic card. I'll show you the back if you guys haven't seen this. There's always someone who's new to the hobby who may not have actually seen a 1951 Bowman football card. The sets that Bowman had from like 1950 through like 1952, the artwork that George Mall produced and Bowman were absolutely fantastic. And it is a leading draw for these cards. A lot of the cards themselves in these sets have actually gone up in price quite a bit. I think because of the artwork and the player selection. Just so many Hall of Famers, in fact. Anyway, there's really something very interesting about Tobin Rote here that I'm going to dive into. He's two articles that I found back to back in the same newspaper. The one interesting thing too about Tobin Rote is that you may notice that there is another Rote, and he's in the 1952 Bowman set. Now, this is Kyle Rote, and he's also a really fantastic ball player. In fact, Tobin here, he was inducted into the Professional Football Researchers Hall of the Very Good, and he was inducted in 2005, while Kyle was inducted in 2006. So they're really great ball players. This is actually Kyle Rote's rookie. I really like this card too. His This is the small, but the large I think is a short print in that set. So I kind of forgot to mention here too that Kyle Rote and Tobin Rote are cousins. They're not brothers, and I didn't know that right when I first started collecting cards. I thought that they were brothers, and they're not. But they're both very deserving of a Hall of Fame consideration or a vote. So this actually is really interesting. I'm going to talk a little bit about Bobby Layne in this article, but the article isn't really about Bobby Layne. I'm going to have another video specifically on Bobby Layne, and again, I have a lot of Bobby Layne cards. This one, it's not particularly my favorite of his. That would be the 52 Bowman. Absolutely a fantastic card all around. This one, I'm really distracted by the large white football, although that is kind of a historic thing, because the NFL did have they did play with white football for several years up till 1955, and so I'll show you the back of this particular card as well. Again, if you guys have never seen one of these cards, now the funny thing is when I was first collecting vintage, I had not seen everything. Obviously, I still haven't seen everything. So um, everybody is new to the hobby at some point, and so I don't mind sharing some of these cards and showing these cards off to somebody who might not be familiar with vintage as I am. But then again, I've been around forever. The thing is, you never know in which direction somebody might go in if they had seen either a sports card or a piece of artwork, or maybe be introduced to literature or a song. You never know what's going to spark somebody's interest into going into a certain field, if you will. So that happens a lot in Star Trek, actually. Anyway, so let's get into these articles. I think they're going to be really interesting, and I'll get back to you in a few minutes. Stick around. This is from the Detroit Free Press, June 29th, 2000. Last champion quarterback of Lions is gone. Rote was fine player, finer friend by David A. Markowitz. Detroit always will remember Tobin Rote for his accomplishments on the football field, especially for what he did during the fall of 1957. Rote, filling in for injured quarterback Bobby Layne, led the Lions to their last NFL championship. Teammate Joe Schmidt recalled that moment Wednesday, the day after Rote died of a heart attack at Saginaw Hospital almost 2 weeks after undergoing back surgery. He was 72. Schmidt, a Hall of Fame linebacker, could have been looking beyond football when he said of Rote, it was a blessing that he was there. His neighbors in the small thumb community of Port Hope would say the same thing. The way he treated people, you'd never know he was the great football player that he was, said longtime friend Rich Schlatt, who often got together with Rote for cards and a beer at the Port Hope Grindstone Sportsman Club. Rote led 3 teams to championships at 3 levels, 1 collegiate and 2 professional. He was named to the Green Bay Packers Hall of Fame, and he did what no T formation quarterback other than Layne has done for Detroit professional football, win the ultimate title. Yet friends in Port Hope, where he retired with his wife Julie in 1993, said it wasn't what Rote said in the huddle that made him special. Just days before he went into the hospital for his back surgery, Rote offered to mow Schlatt's grass because Schlatt had back woes of his own. Here he's got a bad back himself, bad knees. He's going into the hospital, and he offers to do that for me, Schlatt marveled. That's the kind of guy he was. Former teammates would hardly be surprised at that story. They remembered Rote the same way in his years with the Lions from 1957 to 1959. As defensive tackle Gil Maines put it, he was such a nice fella. Rote was quite a quarterback, too. He had a great arm and could really throw the ball, said defensive back Jimmy David, who played with and against Rote. He was a tremendous leader, and he fit right in with our team. On the face of it, Rote wasn't dealt a winning hand when the Packers, making room for Hall of Famer Bart Starr, but sent him to the Lions during training camp in 1957. For one, he was supposed to be a backup after having led the NFL in passing yards in 1956 and in touchdown passes in 1955 and 1956. But Rote blended in quickly, and when Layne suffered a broken ankle in the next to last game of the regular season, Rote took over and took the team to a dramatic comeback playoff victory against San Francisco. Then he had a nearly perfect game in the championship against Cleveland, throwing for 280 yards and 4 touchdowns. He even ran for a touchdown in a 59-14 rout. Typically, Rote cited the team's camaraderie as a reason for its success. We met every Monday at the stadium bar for sandwiches and a few beers, he said in a 1983 interview. We had a close-knit bunch. It seemed like we were together all the time. I think that's what it took to win. Rote already knew about the winning, though. He had led Rice to the Southwest Conference Championship in college, and after leaving the Lions, he went on to the American Football League, where he guided the San Diego Chargers to the league championship. Rice football has mostly floundered since Rote's days, and neither the Lions nor Chargers have won another title. Clearly a championship caliber quarterback, he still never got much publicity. I think he was one of the most underrated quarterbacks in football, Maine said. Even today, I run into people who think that it was Bobby who was our quarterback when he won the championship in 1957, but it was Tobin. Rote also played briefly with the Canadian Football League and with the Denver Broncos until his retirement from the game in 1966. He became an executive with the Fritchback Corp in Detroit and lived in the metropolitan area before moving to Port Hope. Health problems, especially with back and knees damaged by football, had slowed him in recent years, friends said, but he still flashed his engaging personality and wore his championship rings. Schlatt said Rote didn't talk all that much about the glory days, though, and it was clear that Rote felt his accomplishments spoke best for him. Asked once years afterwards about his gutsy performance in '57, Rote responded modestly, "The end result," he said, "is that we got it done." This is from the same newspaper. Rote gave Detroit lasting memory by George Puskas. It said he was the forgotten quarterback, but it was not true. If you saw him, watched him, marveled at his size, his power, the way he could control the football field, there was no forgetting Tobin Rote, not then or now. Rote, the last championship quarterback of the Lions, is dead. He passed away Tuesday in Saginaw of complications from back surgery. He was 72. Maybe the best day he ever lived was an unforgettable brisk Sunday afternoon, December 29th, 1957, when he led the Lions to a rousing 59-14 rout of the Cleveland Browns. It gave the Lions their third National Football League championship in 6 years. The Lions have not won another title, or much that matters, in the 43 years since. Indirectly, in an odd way, Rote was part of the reason. So magnificent was he in the two decisive games, finishing the 1957 season, that the Lions' bosses, President Edwin J. Anderson and coach George Wilson, dared early in the '58 season to trade quarterback Bobby Layne. The Lions had been Layne's team. He dominated it, controlled it, led it in victory and defeat, in celebration and hell-raising, and it was only out of fear that something might happen to Layne that the Lions obtained Rote in the spring of 1957 from the Green Bay Packers. It happened to Layne. He suffered a broken ankle in a 20-7 victory over Cleveland in the next to last game of the season. Waiting on the sidelines for just such an emergency was Tobin Rote, a tall, dark, handsome Texan, an All-America while at Rice University, stepped in to finish off the Browns. Then he beat Chicago, and a week later, in a conference playoff, brought the Lions from 27-7 deficit in the second half to beat San Francisco 31-27. The rally, one of the Lions' 6 comeback victories in a miracle-a-week season, remains the second largest in NFL playoff history. So who could forget Tobin Rote? Certainly not after he followed up all that with 4 touchdown passes to lead the rout of the Browns in the championship game. That one remains tied for the second biggest rout in NFL title history. Alas, there was no question that Rout never got all the praise and acclaim he deserved for the magic moments he brought to the Lions that year. He never really was part of Layne's gang, and it didn't help that he had come to the Lions from, of all places, dreaded Green Bay, Wisconsin. Some regarded him as a simple interloper. In those days, the Lions were a closely knit organization. Many of them, Jimmy David and Joe Schmidt among them, still meet regularly at favored vacation spots around the country. In the summer of 1958, Layne, having mended his torn ankle, was strangely aloof and distant in training camp. He created a lot of consternation among Lion followers. Something was missing from his game. His manner, when he threw 5 interceptions in the first half of a losing effort against the college All-Stars, the doubts about him worsened. The Lions lost their season opener at Baltimore, and when Layne kicked into the turf and muffled a field goal in a 13-13 tie at Green Bay the following week, the Lions bosses decided to move. In the biggest, most controversial and costly trade in the team's history, they traded Layne to the Steelers and left themselves in the hands of Rote. Some aging Lions followers will tell you the team never has recovered from that blow. Well, neither did Tobin Rote, not while he remained in Detroit. The Lions only won 7 more games in the next 2 years, 4-7-1 in 1958, 3-8-1 in 1959, and Rote departed. He wound up in San Diego and quickly made the Chargers big winners and the then champions of the new American Football League. He is the only quarterback to win titles in 2 major professional leagues. Still, Detroit remained his home for many years after. He was a businessman, but I would see him often at Birmingham area clubs where he played cards or watched his kids in swimming meets. He had 3 children and 7 grandchildren. They should know that in his time and in his game, Tobin Rote was something special. All that time, I thought that Bobby Layne was the one that won the 1957 NFL championship for the Detroit Lions, and obviously that's not the case. So that's really interesting. And this also kind of reminds me too that generationally, there's a lot of information that goes missing or it's not told at all. And so me being a historian or someone who follows sports history, there's a lot there that you still can't know. You still really kind of find out new things as you're going along, either in the hobby or in life in general. And this is kind of like a wake up for me, kind of a reminder, really, that one of the reasons why I'm actually doing this and still in the hobby all these years later is that I don't know everything. And if I did, that would be a really boring place to be. I'd be bored as anything if I knew everything. I mean, that would suck. That really would. So, um, Bobby Layne's a really interesting player, really interesting quarterback. He deserves his own video, in fact, because there's just so much on Bobby Layne. And yes, I do collect a lot of Bobby Layne cards. Um, I'm not the biggest fan of him going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. For some reason, I just don't like to collect his cards while he's on the Steelers. I'm more into his days as a Detroit Lion, even if it's on a 53 Bowman like this. There's a lot of cards I do like of his. I'm not a really big fan of his 1948 Leaf rookie, but I know a lot of people really want it in their collection, and it's kind of an expensive card. It's really tough, but I do have a lot of his cards. I will be going through another video of his, and today I really wanted to tell you guys about the 1957 championship and Tobin Rote, and again, the both Rotes, Kyle and Tobin probably should get a vote for Hall of Fame consideration. Even if they don't make it, they should still deserve one. And Bobby Layne, he passed away in 1986, and a lot has I guess, been contributed to his departure from Detroit, uh, where the Lions have not won a championship. I was actually hoping that they would get into the Super Bowl this year in 2024, and that unfortunately didn't happen. Maybe next year that'd be interesting. Tobin Rote here. He's kind of forgot. I think he's kind of forgotten. Um, I hate to say that about these players. They're not forgotten by me, um, but for a lot of collectors, they might not know. And again, like I said, that you can't know everything. And the fun thing about life in general is that there's always something to learn. And even with the hobby, and um, this may be a side issue here, but uh, the hobby is a great place to learn about everything, even things that don't happen to do anything with sports. So I love card shows because I may find something that I've never seen before, or I may encounter a collector or a dealer who has a great story. And again, like there's so much to a card show or a convention that really might not have anything to do with cards. It's if you're there with your friends, it's the camaraderie. It's just seeing things for maybe the first time. Cards, obviously, and then for me personally, when I go to a show, I'm always sitting down and writing notes about what I see and taking photographs and talking to other dealers and collectors and seeing what they have or what their experiences are, and then all the stories that go along with it. So for me, card shows are a really important part of the hobby, and I really don't want a lot of these players to be forgotten about. And that seems to kind of happen through the generations, even in the hobby, where you have a lot of collectors who either write articles or discuss whatever the case may be. So there are a lot of collectors that have passed away and they've taken their knowledge with them, and I really kind of like don't like to see that happen. I I like to share knowledge on cards, on players, on history and economics and everything else associated with a baseball or football card or any kind of card. Um, Usually, unfortunately, I think what happens is that a lot of the information that we gain as a hobby tends to get lost over time because it's not shared with other generations, and that's really something that I think I'd like to try to reverse. Uh, the magazines that we have in the hobby, they're good if you can find them. and sometimes these magazines are not really found. They're pretty rare. Guides, price guides, and all this other stuff. So that's one thing that I kind of like think in the back of my mind. Uh, I remember what it was like when I was a teenager, first starting out in the vintage hobby and not knowing a whole lot about it or how to collect the cards or who the players were. I definitely had an interest in the players like Bobby Layne here or Kyle Rote or Tobin Rote here. But the thing is, like, I didn't know where to begin as a collector. Where do you go when don't know where to begin, or who do you talk to? More appropriately, it's one thing to see these cards, but it's another thing to if you ask like, who is this guy? I have no idea who Tobin Rote is. Um, and then if you're asking a dealer who doesn't know either, well, like that's a problem too, because if you're a dealer, you're supposed to know who the players are and the cards. And I sometimes found that not to be the case. The dealers really didn't know a whole lot about the players that they were selling. Um, and like I guess that's a whole different scenario or problem to have. But that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get into the hobby in the first place, and also because at the time when I was like 14 years old, the 1994 baseball players strike was happening, and there's another video I'm going to be doing specifically on the players strike and what happened afterwards, during and after that strike, because it's just not baseball that the strike is affecting, and there are multiple strikes and lockouts at the same time. Uh, and so that kind of cemented my decision to go into vintage. And if I can go into vintage at a very young age and not know a whole lot about the hobby, um, then other people can do the same thing. It just all it really takes is education and finding people who will help you out. And if you have any questions, as I did, um, I I am very willing to help you guys out with any questions that you may have. I specifically remember that I had a lot of questions about these players. Raymond Parker, for example, Buddy Parker. I saw his 1952 Bowman, and I was like, "Who is this guy? This is an awesome card," but I don't know anything about him. And I studied a lot on these players and on the cards, and there's still a lot to learn. I don't want you guys to think that there's no resource available to learn about these players or even in these cards. And um, one of the takeaways that I had was that, well, I had such a hard time trying to find out all this information. I want to try to make it a little bit easier for the following generations, uh, and help them out if I can. And again, like I don't know everything, and again, that'd be really boring. That would suck. But what I do know, I'd like to kind of like transfer to other generations, and hopefully that works out. I don't know. I mean, it's up to you guys. That's the other thing about the hobby too is that the hobby is there for you if you want to learn about certain aspects of either business or sports or the players, or how to do a deal, how to communicate properly, and it's all there for you if you're willing or you want to learn more about how to go about that stuff, especially on YouTube here. But anyway, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I wanted to kind of like tell you guys a little bit about this championship and these ball players a little bit more, because I didn't know a whole lot about them when I was a kid growing up. So, guys, thank you again. I really appreciate it as always, and I will talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye.